Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as we look at the various cards of the original U.S. Dream Team. Now, the Olympics never really had to worry too much about marketability because they were the foundation of sports. They were that mark that everybody measured themselves to. But as the 1980s progressed, the world of marketability in sports was evolving a great deal, and the Olympics found themselves kind of on the outside. And there were a couple of reasons for that. The main reason, though, was the amateur status. The amateur status really held them back from being able to take advantage of the opportunity of a built-in audience. The idea of amateur was becoming something of a joke. Especially in the Eastern Bloc, you had circumstances where you could have an organization that could operate where all of the competitors inside weren't technically employed to do the job of the sport, which would make them professional. And so they could be amateurs even though really their job title didn't describe what they were doing. And so you would have, say, the Russian army with a basketball team or a hockey team where these guys may never touch a gun in their entire time in the army. They're there to train to become extra special athletes so that by the time that the Olympics come, they're just really good. And then gymnastics was probably the best known of these areas where you had girls who would it was like they were going to school only for that. But it wasn't just the Eastern Bloc where this was happening. In the US, we had some similar situations. David Robinson, for instance, was in the Navy and he played basketball while he was in the Navy. And we had the college athletic system that was built where the money that the colleges could generate would be able to provide them with scholarships to pay players so that they could focus on their sports and their education. And they would have the best in terms of equipment for training and coaches for training. So amateur was already kind of waning in terms of its validity. So by 1992, the Olympics made the smart decision to say, okay, it's no longer about amateurs, it's about the best athletes. So the 92 Olympics in Barcelona were really exciting because now you could have Wimbledon champions who could play in tennis, and you could have Tour de France cyclists who could compete in the Olympics. And of course, as everybody knows, the main focus was basketball, because now, even though hockey became an incredibly competitive environment, basketball was where that one team that we all giddily were hoping to see the ultimate team, it was actually going to happen. It was actually going to happen. So for years we always talk about, oh, an all-pro team. What if the best players in one year competed against, say, the best players in another year? Or what if you cobbled together players from different eras? We always discuss this. All of a sudden in 1992 we were able to see literally the best players on the planet combined together onto a team. Granted, the competition wasn't necessarily top flight, but just the opportunity to see these players was exciting. And not only that, it was the players that were available. It was a unique time to have a truly, truly magnificent team put together. You had Michael Jordan in his prime, Scottie Pippen in his prime, John Stockton and Karl Malone were just hitting their prime. You had Larry Bird and Magic Johnson who were waning, but these guys were too competitive to really fall too much off, and so they were still really strong competitors as well. When you're looking at a second team that includes Karl Malone, John Stockton, and Magic Johnson, these guys, David Robinson, these guys are competing for the sixth man on the team. That's an amazing team. And so that's what we were looking at. All the world's eyes focused on that. Now really the story of the Dream Team is kind of a third tier story in terms of this Olympics. And even in basketball, it's not the main story to talk about, but it's the one we all focus on. So when the 92 Dream Team was assembled, everybody wanted to look at that. That was the big marketability of the sports. And hey, in the world of card collecting, this was exciting. Now, at this time in card collecting, it was still pretty primitive in terms of what we think of now. We didn't think so. It was really exciting, but there were very few insert sets. Parallel cards were just starting to come onto the scene. So for us, it was the subsets within the set. Those were the exciting ones. And some of these subsets could be really sought after chase cards, even though they were no more rare than any of the other cards. And we'll be seeing one of those chase cards, or three of those chase cards, coming up pretty soon. So when the Dream Team came up, man, what are we going to be able to see in terms of these cards? Now, I'll start off with Upper Deck. Upper Deck was not actually one of the card companies that was making Dream Team cards, but for their Upper Deck Authentics cards, they made a big 8.5 by 11 artist rendering of the players. And so I wanted to talk about it just very briefly to say that they did make one of these. And it's serial numbered, and so it was something that you could buy from Upper Deck, and it had its own life, but it wasn't really sought after. It definitely wasn't one of the cards. But that was the only thing that came from Upper Deck, Fleer, Topps, from any of those guys. There were only 2 brands that actually had contracts to make Dream Team cards. One of those was Hoops SkyBox, which I'll be talking about for the most part, but I'll start off with the other company, which was Impel. Now, Impel was a specialty card company. They did all sorts of things that were not regular sports cards. They did Disney cards, things of that nature. So they were the right company to do an Olympics set. And the Olympic set that they did, called 1992 Olympics Hopefuls, was a set that really did look at the whole summer games, not the winter games, just the summer games. So they had swimming, they had track and field, they had equestrian, they had ping pong. And the set has a couple of players from each individual sport. It also had a team card of the Team USA team. And to be clear, it was all Team USA for here, but they had a team card for the baseball team for Team USA. And the only break from all of this was the fact that every single one of the 10 players of the Dream Team had an individual card. So they took up a big section, and they had a team card as well. So they actually had 11 cards out of this card set. Now I say 10 players because initially the way that they select a USA basketball team is they select the first team and the second team, basically 10 players that represent the team. And then later on they select 2 or 3 alternates to be added in later on. And so you'll see them later, but when the team is initially created and they put the original portraits out there, there are only 10 players. So most of the time we're going to be talking about these 10 players. And that's who are in this Impel set. Now, the Impel set doesn't have anything else that's really interesting. They have an insert that's a hologram it's just the Olympic logo. And then they had some autographs, but I don't believe they had autographs of any of the basketball players. So I don't think that applies. But they did have the 10 Dream Team players and the team card. And since there was so little else, it is a set of significance. Now, NBA Hoops, like I said, was the main card company that did this. And at this time, the company was NBA Hoops. Technically, it was NBA Properties, and they owned NBA Hoops and SkyBox. But NBA Hoops was the main company, the main card, and SkyBox was the extra card that was added on. It was the premium card alongside. And it wasn't until 92-93 that they rebranded as SkyBox International. So at this time, it was really more NBA Hoops and SkyBox. And they were the ones who won the contract for the main Dream Team cards. So they're the ones who you see all the other cards of. And NBA Hoops and SkyBox did pretty much the same thing. So for the NBA Hoops cards, they have a white border and they have a picture of the player, full color picture with the full background and the player name up on top. In this case, they have a gold border between the white border on the outside and the picture inside. And up on the top, behind the name, is a flag. And we're just going to pretend that this doesn't look eerily like a French flag. We understand what they were trying to go for. That's pretty much the card front. Now, like I said, they try to do full image shots. And for the Dream Team players, they didn't have action shots, so it's just the portrait behind them. But they also had cards made of the previous 2 Olympic teams, so 84 and 88. And these include only the current NBA player or the then current NBA players, and does not include Dream Team players in it. So in 84, Michael Jordan was on the team, and in 88, David Robinson was in the team, but they're not included in the Seoul or the LA Olympic game teams. So nobody has more than one Olympic card across this span. But for the 84 and the 88 Olympic teams, these are regular action shots, just regular action shots. And on the back, there's no picture, there's just a little write-up, and there's a color in the background behind the text that is yellow for the Olympics, it's pink for the Seoul 88 games, and it's blue for the Dream Team cards. And then they also had a no-number team card, which is really a header card, and it's a gold finish card with the team logo on the front and right up on the back, and that's pretty much all there is to that card, but it is a very nice card. Now, NBA Hoops also put together a contract with McDonald's. So McDonald's distributed packs of NBA Hoops cards for a very truncated set, And it's a regular set which has a whole bunch of NBA players, and then it also has the Dream Team players again. These card designs are almost perfectly the same. The big differences are the portrait is a little bit different, but and the color on the back is a little bit different. But the big thing is, even though the card number is different, on the McDonald's cards, behind the card number, there is an orange basketball, and that's the big dead giveaway that it's one of the McDonald's cards. They're nice cards. They're fun to have, and they do have one difference there beyond all of that, which is that they have a team card showing the whole team, and they also have a Chuck Daly card. So that's kind of the big difference between the regular hoop set and the McDonald's set. But it's kind of the closest thing that you get to a parallel at this particular juncture. Now, SkyBox also did, like I said, pretty much the same thing. They had the Dream Team players, they also had the Seoul Olympic players, and they had the LA Olympic players, 88 and 84. And like with hoops, Jordan and David Robinson are not included in the 84 and the 88 Olympics. So they're only featured in the Dream Team grouping of cards. And right along the side, it says which Olympics it is. But this is SkyBox. And in these early years, SkyBox cut away all of the background and then put in a graphic behind. And for 91-92, they had what we referred to as 3D, because the images have a look of three-dimensionality to them. But a bright pastel image is behind all these players. And for the Dream Team cards, it's a take on the Stars and Stripes flag. And these cards are really cool. They are some of the best card designs from this era. In terms of the 91-92 SkyBox cards, I think these are heads and tails above all the other cards. Now, the card designs for the main Dream Team cards they're more reminiscent of the regular cards from the rest of the set, whereas the 84 and the 88 Olympic cards have a very different feel to them. They actually look a little bit older, which is an interesting concept for how they approach this. And I like that attribute. On the back, these cards have a big portrait, and they have a very small write-up about the player, and they have a big team logo on the back, which takes up a lot of room. And it works with the front of the card to make a card that reads in a 360-degree way that makes it probably one of the best, if not the best, USA team card made throughout the run. They're very simple, they're very straightforward, and they're very complex all at the same time, and it works well. They're a lot of fun. SkyBox also made 3 team cards to go along with this, and these were great chase cards. Basically, it's one 3-card wide card where you put all 3 cards together and you get a running strip of all of the players with the words Barcelona 92 behind them. The cards look exquisite. On the back, they're the same card repeated. It's basically just a little checklist of all the players. But when you combine the 3 cards together, it makes a really amazing image. And the Michael Jordan card specifically, the one that Michael Jordan shows up on, doesn't tend to be really valued more because the 3 cards are seen as a combination. And if you take one card out of the rest, it's not really that big of a deal. So we've always approached these as you want to get all 3. And we chase these cards like crazy. Along with the famous Bo Jackson football baseball card, this was one of the few cards that was a part of a subset or a standalone card that was a really distinctive chase card that wasn't a rookie or an era card. So these were a lot of fun, and they're still really pursued, but they are amazing looking cards. And they are the class of this whole SkyBox set, and probably the class of the whole Dream Team run of 91-92. SkyBox also made a team card, and the team card is the first team on the front and the second team on the back. So it's 5 players in the front, 5 players on the back. It's a white card with a simple gold foil border around the outside. Very basic, very nice. And then for the 91-92 set, they also made a Canadian mini set. And the Canadian mini cards were individually wrapped, and they were a quarter the size of the regular cards. They're neat little cards, but they're only for the regular set. Now, there are mini cards for the USA team, but these were in a book that was called Mark and See. And it's not quite a coloring book, but it's kind of similar to a coloring book. And these were inserted as separate leaves that were seated into each book, so you could easily pull them out. And it was glossy on the front and matte on the back. And each one of the cards was smaller in size. They were perforated in so you could break them out. But even though the proportions of the card are the same as the regular card, the perforated panel where the card was featured was not the same size. So sometimes you'll see these with nice clean sides and maybe the right proportions. That's a cut down card. That's not actually taken out. That's altered beyond the actual size of the card. So these are supposed to be almost square in size in their original form. And they came 5 cards on a sheet. So there are 2 sheets for all of these cards. And if you get them in the clean, perfect sheet form, then they look really nice. And that's obviously the ideal circumstance for them to be in. And they also had 2 other sheets for the team cards. And the team cards were obviously in the full 3 card wide panel, and you could take them out and cut them into the proper smaller cards. So there are 4 sheets total for all of these cards. Now, after the 91-92 season, they made a set in between, which was the official Dream Team card set. And this does not look in any way like a Dream Team card set you would expect. Not on a single card do you see any of the jerseys, any of the logos, except every card has the USA basketball team logo down on it, but otherwise everything is NBA, NBA, NBA. They don't even have borders on the cards. They literally don't have borders. They just have some text up on the top of the card. It's a full bleed, and it's all NBA jerseys. No college jerseys, nothing. And the coach cards work pretty much the same way. So you can't tell, other than the team logo, that these are for the Olympics. The cards are set up in a 9-card page format, so every player has 9 cards. And the cards look at things like their rookie year and their strengths, the various reasons why they've earned a right to be on this team. So it's a long 9-card bio about each player. And they have 8 cards for the 4 coaches. You have Chuck Daly, you have Lenny Wilkins, you have PJ Carlesimo, and you have Coach K. And they have their statistics, and they have a little write-up about each one. So there are 4 coaches and 2 cards for each coach. You have 2 checklists, and then the set concludes with Magic talking about each one of the members of the team. So there are 10 cards there for the 10 players, and Magic talks about each player, including Magic Johnson. And I really wish he'd taken a chance to take a dig at Michael in his description about himself, because, hey, what could go wrong with that, right? So that was the set. And there really wasn't anything distinctive about it. It is the official Dream Team set. It's not really a Dream Team set. They did do one insert card though. And the insert card does stand out for a number of reasons. First of all, it's portraits in their jersey. It's the only card in the entire Dream Team set that actually shows them in their Dream Team jerseys. It's a plastic card, rounded corners, about the size of a credit card, but a lot thinner and pretty bendy. Like I said, on the front, it's a portrait. And it's kind of a haphazard array of the players. It's not an actual portrait, it's a photoshopped portrait, but it acts as one. And on the back, it looks exactly like the regular SkyBox USA team cards. So it's unmistakable that it's a part of that team. I'll be mentioning that again in a second. So for 92-93, NBA Hoops decided to go ahead and show the Dream Team players again in their regular Series 1 set. But this time, they had the ability to show them in an action shot. And the reason for that was because the Olympics hadn't necessarily started by the time they were making these cards, the qualifying event had. And the qualifying event is called the Tournament of Americas. This is an opportunity for teams to prove that they're worthy of being in the Olympics, and it helps with seeding the schedule in the Olympics. But for the Dream Team, basically, this was an opportunity for a preseason. So this was the first time that you got to actually see the Dream Team in action, in their uniforms, in a game. And NBA Hoops included them with the Tournament of America's logo on each one, but they're the only action shots of the Dream Team players at that time. And on the back of the cards, they talk about the statistics from the Tournament of Americas proper, so that you can see how the players performed during this qualifying phase. So they're kind of unique cards, and they're all 12. Now, one thing I hadn't mentioned was that in the 91-92 SkyBox set, Clyde Drexler did have a card. It was a send-away, and it was an autograph. I haven't gotten my hands on it, so I could show you a picture of it, but I don't want to talk about a card I don't actually know. So he did have one there. That was his only card. Leitner did not, because Leitner was still in college. But for 92-93, both Drexler and Leitner finally had cards. So they showed up in this run of cards. And I don't know where the Beckett's at right now, but the Beckett has been kind of on and off with the next two cards I'm going to talk about. There is an unnumbered team card for the US Dream Team, all 12 players, for the Tournament of Americas phase. And this card is a portrait on the front, and on the back it talks a little bit about the team, and it has another portrait shot of the whole team. The other insert card that NBA Hoops included is another team card. It's also plastic, it's also rounded, about the same size as the SkyBox one, but it's thinner plastic. It's a little bendier than the SkyBox one, but this one is unmistakably NBA Hoops. And the reason I'm distinguishing this is because in the Beckett used to refer to this, and then after a while they started referring to it as, well, that's the SkyBox card we talked about in the SkyBox USA. It's not the SkyBox, it's totally different. How can you tell? First off, on the front, it says NBA Hoops right on the front, right at the bottom. And also, while the SkyBox card is a portrait on the front and a regular SkyBox card on the back, this is a picture on the front of the opening ceremonies, and on the back is the portrait. Now, the opening ceremony for the '92 Barcelona Olympics was a really cool event because they had an archer down in the stadium who fired off a flaming arrow up to the cauldron where the flame was at. And he hit his shot. It was an amazing shot. It's one of those really high pressure moments, and he pulled it off. And it really is one of the most enduring images of any Olympics. And so they have a shot showing that. It's a time lapse, so you can see the arrow coming up at an angle, and you can see the cauldron lit. So that's the front of the card, and then on the back is another portrait. It also shows the scores of all of the games. And the portrait is distinguished from the previous one because in the SkyBox, the portrait is haphazard. But in this one, it's very formal. Everybody's lined up in a proper way, all the heights, it's only 2 rows, and there's a big American flag in the back. So it's very clear, one card from the other, but they're both separate. And the NBA Hoops card is a lot harder to get. The SkyBox one, very easy, but the Hoops card is really tough to get. And I want to thank Matt for helping me getting this, because this was a labor. This card was the one that held up this whole video for actually a couple of months. So there's only one other card to talk about at this point, which is the 92-93 SkyBox card. And they didn't do one in the set like they did with NBA Hoops. Instead, they did an insert set. And this insert set, again, it's 12 cards, so Drexler and Leitner are included. And this is SkyBox at its best. These are action shots technically, but there's no background. It's a normal original SkyBox background where they just have some cool effects. These cards look great. They're the only cards that can compete with and possibly outdo the 91-92 SkyBox cards. They are very elegant, and they are very difficult cards to chase. Not at the level of the plastic inserts, but pretty high up there. And that's because they really are distinctive. But that's it. That closes out the whole 91-92 window of the Dream Team. These are all the cards that were made of the Dream Team at the time. There would be look backs in later cards that would come along, but this was it, and it was surprisingly lackadaisical. For what we would see coming up, this was a bit limited, but they're fun cards to get. They are some of the best looking cards. They're just limited in number, not in quantity. This was the end of the junk wax era, so there are quite a few of these cards, but there just weren't that many options overall. So I'll be looking at the rest of SkyBox cards. NBA Hoops didn't make any more, but SkyBox did continue with the 94 and the 96 years. I'll be looking at that in a later video. But I wanted to really get in depth, and I think I talked for a little bit too long, but that's okay, because I've been waiting a long time and I just can't say any less about this. In fact, I've cut out a lot of what I want to say because this was an amazing time, and these were cards that were associated with an amazing experience. And for those of us who are part of it, this was really, really, really fun. There are other things about the US Olympic team that I'll be talking about in other videos. But as far as the cards go, this is it. This is the world of Dream Team cards. So I hope that you enjoyed the video. I hope that you learned some things. And feel free to use the comment section below to talk about this team. Talk about the importance, if you think it was overrated, if you think it was underrated. which is, for this team, it was pretty difficult. But also, feel free to mention about the European teams, because that's really the conversation that is pertinent to this. And ask any questions that you have, and bring up anything that you may know card-wise, especially if you happen to know some cards that I never knew about, some cards that I didn't have the opportunity to experience and talk about here in this video, because I'd always love to add more. But this is the full extent that I know of these cards. So please, again, let me know in the comments below. I hope that you like the video, hope that you'll hit the like button. I definitely hope that you'll subscribe, and be sure to look for my video on the SkyBox cards of the 94 and the 96 US Olympic teams coming up down the road. And also be sure to look for the video on the Fleer USA cards that I've already done. So thank you very much for watching, and hope you have a good day.